Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Got a good topic for you today. Let's get down to work. Truckers of Reddit, what's your spookiest story from on the road? A little not safe for work. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was driving between Melbourne and Albury very late one night on the Hume Freeway. For the non-Aussies, that stretch of the Hume is very wide, flat, and straight, so it's boring and hypnotic, especially driving alone at night. It was the middle of summer, so I was surprised to see little wisps of fog whipping through my headlight beams, but then the smell of burning plastic hit my nose, and I realized it was smoke. Up ahead, there was one other car on the road, and I could just see a tiny yellow light on the back, like a candle flame. Worried, I sped up to catch this guy, and by the time I reached, his entire muffler was on fire. I flashed my lights and honked my horn trying to get his attention. Just as I drew up alongside him, I saw him turn to look at me, and then a huge gout of orange flame burst out from under the car and licked across his driver's side window. Needless to say, he pulled over in a big hurry, and I pulled over about 50 meters ahead of him. I jumped out from behind the wheel and sprinted back to him to make sure he was out of the car and safe, then back to get my phone and called emergency services while running back to him. It was less than a minute since he'd pulled over, and the entire car was a fireball. I asked if he was okay, and he said yeah, but his phone and wallet were both still inside the car. I let him use my phone to make some calls and gave him all the cash in my wallet, which wasn't much at the time, and finally continued on my way once the firefighters and ambulance arrived. Let's just say I was wide awake for the rest of my drive. TLDR. Stopped to help a motorist with a possible flat. May have prevented a murder. I service fire equipment, so I drive a box truck and cover parts of Pennsylvania, New York, Ohio, Maryland, and West Virginia. I was in rural Northwest Pennsylvania, returning from a service call and heading toward the interstate to go home. On the way to this customer, I saw a small pickup truck on the interstate whose right rear tire was steadily deflating. A mile or so before my exit, they pulled off to the side. I didn't stop to see if they needed help and felt a little bad about it. As I drove down this dark, twisty road, I passed a Dodge Durango pulled over into a barn driveway. There was a person lying on the ground behind it, struggling with something. It looked like the guy was trying to change a tire or get the spare out from under the Durango. Remembering the pickup from earlier, I decided to turn around and see if he needed help. I pulled into the first driveway I saw, about a quarter mile down the road, turned around and headed back. Halfway back, the Durango passed me, going the direction I had originally been headed. I got back to where I seen the Durango, planning to turn around again, but as I swung into the driveway, my headlights caught a figure lying motionless in the snow. I stopped and jumped out just as the figure sat up. It was a woman, maybe in her 40s, in a thin, torn black skirt and top. Her hair was mussed, her eye was starting to swell, she had red marks on her throat, and her lip was bleeding. I helped her up, got her into my truck, and cranked up the heat. I had taken my jacket off, so I gave it to her, and she covered her torso and arms. She didn't want to say anything. Her throat was sore, and she was badly frightened. I called 911, and they dispatched a police car. I gave her a bottle of water, and she whispered, "Thank you," then sat with her head bowed and eyes closed. It took about 15 minutes for the police car to get there, and she stayed silent. As the car pulled in, she said mostly to herself, "He's gonna arrest me." The trooper walked up and motioned me to exit, asked her if she needed an ambulance. She declined, then asked me what had happened. I explained what I had seen. He wrote everything down, then talked to her for a few minutes. He helped her out of the truck and into his car. She quietly thanked me for coming back because she thought that guy meant to kill her. As far as I know, she wasn't arrested. She was pretty beat up, and the trooper spoke and handled her as if she were the victim of an assault. It was almost certainly a transaction, sex or drugs, that had gone badly. I never found out what had happened. I watched the news outlets for that area for a while, but never found anything. When you hear stories like this, my first thought is just, if the person was doing anything questionable or morally not right, maybe they learned a lesson, maybe turned their life around. We can only hope, right? Myself and another truck were traveling Highway 1 between Medicine Hat AB and Brooks AB on our way home from Saskatchewan. And it's really dark there since you're 100 kilometers away from any town lights. And then all of a sudden, the whole sky lit up as green as grass and a huge fireball streaked over us. We all immediately pulled over and asked each other what the F was that. Heard on the news the next day, it was a meteor the size of an office desk that landed somewhere between, I can't say that word, Minister, and Cold Lake. We had never seen anything like it. I saw a young girl being beaten in the back of a car badly, closed fist to the face repeatedly, clear as day. Even though it was night, my lights lit up their car. Followed them, hitting the horn, got number of plate, and rang police, but they got away. Police called me the next day to say they had investigated and was told the girl was having a medical emergency and was fine. This is going to get long. Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I was delivering and installing machines for the company I was working for. I was in a 26-foot box truck with 12 machines in the back. I was having trouble with the truck the day before, had it checked out by the rental company, and they said it was all good. Since I was behind schedule due to the truck and problems with installations, I decided to drive late to my next destination. It was about 11 o'clock at night on a state route through the Upper Peninsula. There were no streetlights. There were no other cars. The headlights from my truck were the only thing illuminating the road. I was already creeped out. At the peak of feeling like I was in the middle of nowhere, because I was in fact in the middle of nowhere, every single light on the dashboard of the truck lit up, and then it stalled. Now it's pitch black. I'm stopped, and the truck isn't restarting. Rather than eat up the battery trying to turn it over, I shut everything down and started making phone calls. As I was calling everyone and anyone that would listen, I sat in the dark night with the only light being from my hazard lights. I looked up and saw something move in front of the truck, just out of distance from the flashing lights. At first, I thought it was my imagination. I finally got a hold of someone, and they told me it would be 2 to 3 hours before they could get a mechanic to me. So now I'm sitting in silence. The only noise is the clicking the hazard lights are making, and I'm staring out the windshield into the void of darkness when I see movement again. Just as I was about to shit my pants, my phone rang, and that nearly secured the pants shitting because it scared the hell out of me. It was a mechanic that wanted me to get out, open the hood, and check some things out. No, I'm not getting out of the truck, with an explanation as to why. He was irritated with me, but I didn't care. So finally, after seeing the movement just out of range of the lights one more time, I threw on the headlights with the high beams. The headlights caught 3 wolves snacking on something that looked like roadkill. I honked the horn, and they looked at me like they were irritated more than scared. I was safe. The wolves more than likely weren't going to bother me, but it was spooky just knowing they were there. So I shut the lights off. I would turn the lights on occasionally to check to see if they were still there. I was basically just sitting there listening to the hazard flashers click while surfing my phone. Each time I turned the lights on, the wolves were still there. Just to remind you, I'm in the middle of nowhere. No homes, no business, nothing but trees, wilderness, and wolves. I suddenly heard what I can only equate to a woman's scream of terror that sounded like it came from right behind the truck. Then, something slammed into the side of the truck, hard enough to rock it. I wasn't afraid of the truck tipping over, but whatever hit it hard enough to rock the suspension enough to move me around in the cab. It was a pretty heavy truck. I turned every light that truck had on, slipped it into reverse so the reverse lights came on, and laid on the horn. I was checking both mirrors, and the only thing I saw was a shadow bolt across the road. I couldn't make out what it technically was, but in my head it was a werewolf yeti Bigfoot lizard monster that was going to end my life, and it was going to be agonizingly painful the entire time. I also noticed the wolves were gone. From every nature documentary I've watched, the only time predators leave food is when there's a bigger, badder predator around. By this time, I was in full Bobby Hill, that's my purse, I don't know you mode. Whatever crossed the road, didn't cross very far off the road. I could hear it thrashing around in the brush, breaking sticks and what sounded to be logs. There was no noise pollution. I only had my window cracked a little bit, and I could hear pretty well. I basically had the steering wheel gripped, all the lights on, and was feverishly looking out the windows and through the mirrors to make sure nothing was around the immediate area of the truck. I couldn't see off the road, and the flashlights I had were in the back of the truck in my tool bag. I'd have to get out of the truck to get them. Finally, I saw some headlights through one of my mirrors. It seemed like it took hours for them to close the distance to me. The noise stopped as the headlights approached. It was obviously the mechanic, because no one else was stupid enough to be out there beside me. The mechanic pulled out in front of me. My headlights were shining on him and his truck. As his door opened to step out, we both hear the woman screaming in terror yell again, and the brush thrashing intensified. Whatever it was still close and pissed. His door immediately closed and my phone rang. He called my phone asking me what it was. He sounded more panicked than me. I had no clue what it was, and he had no clue what it was, so the mechanic called the police. He wouldn't work on my truck until we could secure the area, which I don't blame him. He didn't like my idea of him getting out of his truck just to check things out. 2 Michigan State police officers showed up. They lit that area up like it was a stadium. I finally stepped out of the truck for the first time since it all started. We heard that scream 3 more times while the mechanic was working on my truck. Thankfully, they were getting further away. The cops had no clue what it was either. They were kind of spooked too. The mechanic finally got my truck running, and I made it to the hotel for the night. The next morning, I walked the truck for inspection, and the side that was hit, there was an indentation about the size of a basketball. Whatever hit it didn't hit it hard enough to push all the way through, but it definitely mushed the fiberglass. The indentation was about 7 feet off the ground. I have no idea what it was. I probably never will. I do confidently know that I will never, ever drive through the Upper Peninsula at night again. Well, I guess if you're in such a remote area, staying in the truck could be a good idea. No fault there. You're not going to lose your man card for that, so good job. I used to travel for work doing construction. My boss was driving and I was passenger. We're on our way back home from Tennessee to Illinois, just leaving the mountains, but still pretty much in the middle of nowhere, and we noticed a couple dead deer on the road. These are so if we had to crush a couple, it was no big deal. It went on for more than a mile, maybe up to 1.5 miles. My boss had been on the road a lot more years than I had. I asked him, what the hell was that? And he seemed just as lost as me. He said, I have no effing idea, and I'm not stopping to find out. That shit didn't make any sense. Had a family member who was a trucker for a fireworks company in the 80s. They regularly had to make deliveries from the East Coast to Los Angeles. Shipping these things to California meant many drives through the open desert of the American Southwest. They've claimed to see tons of weird stuff out there, from glowing orbs, unexplained lights, and weird animals in the dark. The desert has a way of messing with the human mind, but one night a bunch of floating orbs on the horizon turned out to be legit. They saw a bunch of orange orbs crossing the highway a mile or so ahead. It turns out that a bunch of tumbleweeds had caught fire in a forest fire several miles away and were flying across the highway ahead. They had to drive down this open desert highway at night while being on the lookout for flaming tumbleweeds. Not really something you want to maneuver around when you're carrying fireworks in your trailer. In 2017, one of my routes I had stopped at Love's gas station in Emerson, Georgia, maybe 20 minutes outside Atlanta. I had been stopped for about an hour just resting and eating some fast food when a woman came knocking on my door. I opened it, and she looked homeless and pretty old, like in her 50s, or 60s. I asked her if I could help her, and she was like, I think we can help each other. And I said, how so? And she proceeds to proposition me paying her for sex, which I declined, and sent her on her way. I continued to rest and eat and play on my phone for another 30 minutes when someone comes to my door and opens it and attempts to rob me in a scream mask. It was obviously the old lady from before. I push her away and lock my door and crank it up. I assume she ran off somewhere because I could no longer see her. After the truck was ready, I pulled off and started driving. Soon, cars next to started trying to get my attention and honking and pointing to the back end of my truck. I pull over, and when I come to a stop, I see someone jump and start running. It was that same lady. This crazy woman was hanging onto the back of my truck while I was driving. It was just a really odd experience. I know this is a really serious situation, so I'm not trying to make light of it, but just the idea of a mid-50s woman in a scream mask hanging on to a tractor trailer, honestly, that hits my funny bone, so I guess that's me. My mom is a trucker. This is her story. She was driving through Arizona when she saw what she thought were leaves blowing across the road in the distance. That puzzled her since there's mostly pine trees in northern Arizona. When she finally got to the leaves, she realized that they were migrating tarantulas, thousands of them. There were so many of them that her truck was sliding on their guts, so she had to slow down. She stopped at the first truck stop and told her co-driver to fuel up. He was sleeping at the time because she wasn't going to step foot outside after what she just saw. Her co-driver was pissed since it was technically his time off, and he thought she was crazy until he saw the tarantula guts and legs caked to the inside wheel well of the truck. She also outran a tornado in the Midwest. She was about to pull over and take cover until she saw another big rig that was parked on the side of the road get tossed a couple hundred yards like a toy. She called me and told me that she thought she was going to die and wanted her last words to be "I love you" to me. She pulled off the freeway and got to a Walmart, where she ran into the basement where all the staff and customers were taking shelter. After the tornado passed, they stepped out of the basement and into daylight since the Walmart was destroyed. She has many stories like this. Trucking is 90% boredom, 10% insane shit like this. My wife's grandfather hauled fruit and potatoes across the Northwest and Central Plains. From what he would talk about, I swear he was a serial killer. He had found or been questioned about a half a dozen deaths at rest stops. Most, if not all, were determined suicide. He also talked about all the rich women that drove SUVs and how frequently he would see them masturbating at red lights. Guy was a real character. Not my story, but my late stepfather was a truck driver. Back in the 80s, he used to be a log truck driver for my uncle, I think, in BC, and would haul logs around Suchomish and Kelowna. He used to drive at night, long hours on little sleep and lots of coffee and caffeine pills. He claimed this one time he had fallen asleep at the wheel while hauling one night and woke up 3 hours later, having arrived at his destination. He has no recollection of how he made it there, alive, and without causing an accident. He also told me stories about the hallucinations he would have while driving on such little sleep, seeing people on the road, creatures, monsters, animals that were there, all in his head. Thankfully, he would pull over and try to rest, but it was a miracle the man lived through all of that. A trucker I know claims he was driving a logging truck down a remote dirt road in the middle of a forest at around midnight when a dog-man creature walked out in the middle of the road. It stared at him for a few seconds plainly, visible and well illuminated by all the auxiliary lights on the truck. Then it just took off and disappeared into the woods on the other side of the road. He's not a superstitious man, and he rejects everything supernatural as fiction, but he 100% believes that what he saw that night was real. I've only heard him talk about this twice. He was very drunk both times he opened up about it. Just talking about it rattled him. He was clearly uncomfortable thinking back about that night.